Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Before we get into this month's normal person interview, I want to remind you guys that we are opening enrollment for our people-pleasing course next Friday, the
Getting
21st.
over people-pleasing. It's not a course about learning how to people-please.
No, we're not advocating for more people-pleasing.
Just wanted to make that really, really clear in case any of you were confused.
No, we're going to help you break your bad habit of people-pleasing.
Getting over people-pleasing. Or you can call it GOP. It's a really
I don't like that as much.
bad acronym.
So you'll notice that today's episode is not really all about people-pleasing, but that's a big component of the conversation. So if this feels at all relevant, then hey, you might want to hear us talk a little bit more at the end about getting over people-pleasing, which is not getting started next week, but you can sign up next week. It'll actually be officially getting started on the 31st.
Mm-hmm. It'll be it'll go by quickly. It's very inexpensive. And it's, I dare say, kind of fun, even though it is also emotional, a little bit of emotional labor. But mostly you have accountability.
Yes.
And that's what you need. You can't get over something like that unless someone is really kind of holding your feet to the fire, but like lovingly so.
Yes. And telling you what to do, because just the whole vague concept of, I want to stop people pleasing so much. Well, okay, but what does that mean and how do you stop? That's what we're going to help you figure out.
You can't just say, I'm going to work on that, because you won't.
No,
you
won't.
You need accountability.
You won't know what to do. You won't hold yourself accountable.
Even if you did, you won't do it.
No.
I mean, I know this from experience. That's just not how people work.
I definitely know this from experience.
Well,
people pleasing particularly. Yeah,
this is why we're coaches, is because coaching, even if sometimes people know what they need to do, they're just not doing it. And so with coaching, it's not just about holding them accountable. It's about helping them connect to the intrinsic motivation for why they would do it in the first place. And with Rachel, who is our normal person for this month, for her, I think that she was very reluctant or scared to leave the position that she started out in and then to go into a very different role that was actually fully aligned with who she is. And she talks about that a little bit. But I think what made her feel confident in her ability to do it, even though it was a huge transition and she was scared of what people were going to think, and she was scared to kind of like almost like come out as a kind of very different type of person than she'd been pretending to be for a decade, was, I know for a fact that this is aligned with who I am and my values and what I want. And me doing this role for 10 years was me trying to please other people. And now I see how those dots connect, and I now have the proper motivation because I understand this is me expressing myself and this is valuable. And like, if it just feels like a whim, feels like, I kind of think I like that, you might not do it. So coaching really helps you get to the core of, why do I want to do this? And why is it worth pushing back? Why is it worth getting over the people pleasing in the first place?
Why is it worth it? And like, what is it like on the other side? I feel like people who have been living in this bubble of people pleasing for so long are wondering, is it even possible for me to get over this? And what is life like over there on this other side of people pleasing? Rachel's such a good example of that in this interview.
So would you like to read her bio?
Yes, I would.
Please.
Okay. Rachael fell into a career in procurement by complete accident and has spent the last 10 years in a field that never really seemed to fit. Her insightful husband could easily see that she wasn't happy and pushed her to define her passion and follow it, which led to a New Year's Eve purchase of the Passion Profile short course. I love that. Halfway through the course, she heard the line, "Stop living life in the margins," and felt it in her soul. She has since learned to stop apologizing and people-pleasing, though she's still on that journey, and has transitioned to a role leading transformation and capability building within her company. She's allowed herself to unlock the creativity she'd been hiding for years, truly beginning to enjoy herself and take chances. So much so that recently she's been told she has a MacGyver spirit, which she tries to live every day. That's great.
She's great. She's also a very, very natural coach, and she's considering becoming one. And I think it's a no-brainer because she's got all the right stuff. And I really, really like this conversation with her for so many reasons, but also because she literally coached me accidentally. She wasn't really intending to, but just what she was sharing actually helped me get over something I was kind of hung up on that day. So I think that you're going to get a lot out of this, whether you're a people pleaser or not, because I'm not, but she still helped me a lot with this conversation.
I love that. That's the value of these conversations with normal people. It's like they bring their own level of expertise every single time. So I'm excited to listen to it as well.
Okay, so we will be back at the end. Enjoy. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
I think that, I'm just trying to think. I think that you must be one of at least 3 different Rachels that I've coached over the years. I mean, Rachel was a very popular name in the 80s.
Yes, it was. I would like to think it still is, but it's mostly just
Have you met any babies named Rachel lately? I haven't.
No, I haven't.
Mm-mm. No, I think it peaked in the 80s. I actually looked it up. It was pretty high up there at one point in the 80s.
I think it'll come back. I think it'll do a pendulum.
It probably
swing.
will. When we're like 80, everyone's going to think that's a cool name again.
Yes.
Anyway, you're Rachel with an AEL, which makes you different.
I guess, or more just difficult to spell.
Well, that happens to me all the time that people put the extra A in there. So I don't know. I think that we can have like a duel of Rachel versus AEL. So I wanted to talk to you specifically because there's something you said in one of your last calls with me that just planted a seed for a conversation. And it was, we're going to have to like plant it and then we're going to have to go back and talk about how you got to this point. But what you said was, I think I need to get comfortable with scaring people a little bit. And that is something that I think a lot of people, especially people who identify as people pleasers, they might be able to relate to it, but they hear that and they're like, oh my God, that sounds terrifying. Why would I want to scare anybody? And why would I ever want to get comfortable with that, you know? So I want to kind of go back and explain how you got to the point where you're actually okay with the idea of scaring people. So let's start from the beginning, or maybe not the beginning, but where you were before that was a notion that ever would have been comfortable for you.
I think that, so I've always been a people pleaser. That's always been a part of how I identified. And it was a bit of, if I'm not helping someone, then who am I? If I'm not making everyone happy, then I'm not valuable. And I think a lot of that was rooted in this sort of hustle for worth concept that we hear a lot about these days. If I wasn't suffering, then I didn't deserve to be happy. It was sort of all tied into this really deep, I considered it work ethic at the time, but now I don't really see it as work ethic. I see it as basing your self-worth on other people's acceptance, which is, I think, down deep what people pleasing is. And it's been interesting because I have been in a job for a long time that didn't really fit, doing really well at things that I didn't really enjoy doing at the sort of deep core level, and just trying to figure out why it always sort of felt that I wasn't comfortable taking chances. I wasn't comfortable doing anything differently. And as you and I sort of went through this conversation, it became really apparent to me that to do the things I really wanted to do, I was going to have to take chances. And to enjoy the things that I was doing, I was going to have to take chances. And in taking chances, you quite often disrupt the status quo and end up scaring people a little bit or making people uncomfortable. But what's interesting about it is it seems to actually be accepted pretty well. What I think is going to scare people isn't usually scary to other people.
That's a very good point. Yeah, we have a low bar for what we think is unacceptable.
Yes,
and that's
we
not
do.
With anything, right? Like anything could count as unacceptable, not just people pleasing type stuff, but really across the board. We just think there's such a low threshold for what other people will accept about us.
Mm-hmm.
And the bar is always, always higher for other people than where we put it.
Yeah. And I think when you look at the people that you admire, they're generally not the super conservative, not ever taking chances, never standing up for themselves, never doing any fun things people, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people that you admire are strong and genuine and willing to sort of go the extra mile. And those are the people that I find usually drawn to. And so it makes sense that I would want to take chances because people I admire take chances. So
it's such an easy thing. It seems like it's an easy thing for you to say now, but I know that if you'd played this conversation back like 6 months ago or something, you would have been like, absolutely not. So I'm just curious, what were some of I think I know, but I think everyone else is going to want to know too. What were some of the biggest kind of core beliefs you had about the way that the world worked? You mentioned one of them just now that I think is really good, which is about work ethic, and that work ethic equals you're suffering. And if you're not suffering, you must not be working hard. Can we start there? Can we talk more about that one?
Yeah. I grew up in the country on a farm, and it was very rooted in working day to day, every day to make sure that we were thriving and that the farm was thriving. And it's hard. It's very, very difficult work. And when that's sort of all it's hard everything is a struggle, right? So it's always hard. There's these really beautiful moments too, but they're all at the end of struggle. There's never an easy day there that doesn't take some sort of manual labor or, just something that's difficult or a problem you've got to solve. It's always something hard. And these wonderful moments at the end are always worth it, but it's very intrinsically tied to your worth, right? So if it came easy, it probably didn't result in what you wanted. It wasn't wasn't giving us the outcome that we needed. It was interesting because I carried that with me for many years. And so I would do these jobs that were they're just not suited to my personality, and they're not suited to the way that I deal in the world, the way that my energy flows, any of it. And I would just battle through it because that's what you did to get the good outcome. You battled through it. You did the hard stuff. And everything, you will always have struggle. You will always have things that are hard, but it should not be soul crushing to the point where you think, if I maybe just had an accident and had to go to the hospital for a little while, I wouldn't have to go to work. Those are some of the thoughts I was having early on in my career, which are incredibly unhealthy. And it takes years to sort of recognize that is unhealthy, and nothing is worth, sort of giving up on yourself in that way. And so I think it was very tied to the way I grew up, believed your value came through hard work. So who could work the hardest for the longest and do the most difficult thing, and that's who was worth the most. When really everybody has intrinsic self-worth, and doing the things that you enjoy doing generally make you better at them because you're doing things you really like. Not everyone can do all things. No one can do all things. And so why not find the thing that you're really good at because you love it and that it fits with your energy?
Yeah. I think that you're shining a light on just how much programming, like really old familial programming, goes into how you feel about, let's just say, your work situation. We could talk about relationships. We could talk about health. We could talk about anything, because I think that programming underlies all sorts of things. But focusing just specifically on the work situation, I don't think we realize that so much about how we grew up and how we learn to think about or define notions like work and success have so much to do with our experience of them now. It was pretty obvious to me when I met you that like there's a correlation here, but I don't think it was as obvious to you from the beginning.
I agree. It really wasn't.
Yeah. That like, well, yeah, Rachel, you're maybe not supposed to be miserable in your job. But to you, that was just what work was like. And it just feels like, okay, well, it's supposed to be a struggle, so I must be doing something right because I'm struggling a lot.
Yes. And I think, so I told you about the workhorse versus
that is one of
horse.
my favorite things. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I told you early on when I was young and we were doing work on the farm, the phrase I used to get frustrated about always doing, it was 100 degrees and we're on a hay wagon and we've been baling hay all day and you get exhausted, you get hot and you just say you don't want to do it anymore. And it's frustrating. And I was always told some people are show horses, some people are workhorses. We are workhorses and this is what we do. And this is what we're meant to do. And that I didn't realize until very recently that apparently that's a larger family statement as well, because a second cousin actually posted about it on Instagram.
Right.
And I realized, holy cow, her family said this to her too. So this is a deep rooted.
This is like
familial.
great-great-grandparents were
Yes.
saying this. Yeah.
Yes. So this has come down through my family. And there is this, you have to work for everything you have, nothing, and you take what you're given. There is no, maybe I want to do something else. You take the career that's been given to you. You take the job that's been given to you. You work hard to get it, but you don't deserve to go elsewhere and be happy, or you don't if you have something good, then you're expected to stay and do whatever it takes. And good is defined by the fact that they are letting you come and do it every day,
Right.
and paying you more so than do you enjoy it? Do you think it's worthwhile? Does it fit with your values or any of those things?
Right. No, I'm assuming workhorse values are stability and security. And if it's, I'm sure there's a couple more than that, but if it's giving you those things, why would you question it? Right.
Right. A right to question it. You're lucky and you just need to stick.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're lucky to even have it. So it's funny because it became pretty clear when we were talking that you have always been much more of a show horse than a workhorse. And that's probably been a source of a little bit of shame, to be honest. Like since you were a kid, is I don't actually fit in with this mentality. And so there's a little bit of a burden of I'm not like these people. And yet in order to be accepted, I've got to try really hard to go against my inclination. So what was your inclination when you were a kid?
I was very loud and sort of sparkly and bubbly. And I just wanted to run around and talk to everyone and make art and sing and just be this sort of, I found everything exciting. I thought everything was interesting. I wanted to go out and see the world. I just wanted to do all these crazy things. I'm from a town with 500 people. Going out to see the world is a foreign concept. And sort of the thought of being creative is not worth a lot. And so it was more linked to, you're just too loud, you're too much, just calm down. Sort of this consistent, just be a workhorse, not a show horse, do what you're told, just get it done. And it wasn't, it was a wonderful childhood. It just, some of the things that I left with were an incredible work ethic, which I still have, but tied to that was this innate sense of, if you want to be loved, if you want to be liked, you need to be quiet, you need to be calm, you need to be, and you need to just do what's asked of you, regardless of what it takes out of you. So as an adult who's worked for a number of years now doing in a career, a success that's never really felt like it fit, digging into the why has been really interesting. So
yeah, I think that whenever I picture you as a little kid, I just feel a little bit like of a pang of empathy for this sparkly little kid growing up on a farm who was not really, that was not her destiny, nor the place where she was the most alive, or the place where, she was most sort of at your best in that type of life. And yet I think that's what happens, is that we end up kind of having to choose. It's not conscious, but we end up having to choose between, okay, well, I'm either going to get acceptance or I'm going to be myself. And it's really, really hard to feel like you can't have both. But as a kid, people, beyond just being a kid, but unconsciously as a kid, you're never going to choose to be yourself over being accepted. You need to be accepted by your family because they're the ones providing for you. It's kind of a biological impulse for you to make sure that these people like me and that they want to keep feeding me and taking care of me. And I want to fit in and I don't want to create conflict. So I guess I got to tone it down a notch. I got to be a little bit less so that I can fit in here. And it's understandable. But over time, it takes a really big toll on, I think, your mental, physical, emotional health. So how is that for you? Like,
Well, I think the other thing is that genetically, the women in my family tend to be very emotional beings. We just tend to have really large swings of emotion. And it's not just me. I've seen it's in the familial line. You can see it. We all have the sort of same, when we're young, we all have the same challenge, sort of controlling our emotions. And we're just very sensitive to the world around us and very empathetic. And so you feel things really, really deeply. And for a really long time, I saw that as a major weakness. And also at work, it would come up as a blocker because I was too passionate about things, or I would get really upset about things that I didn't think were, I don't know if fair is the right word, but that weren't justified. If I thought something was unjustified, it was hard for me. And I sort of had to adjust and go through the process of dealing with it emotionally. And so for years, it came up as a blocker. And what's ironic is now that I'm as advanced as I've ever been in my career, and I'm a parent to young kids who my daughter is the same exact way with the huge emotional swings. I'm watching it happen again. I recognize that it's actually a superpower if you can use it correctly. So if you can harness the ability to read a room, the ability to read the emotions, the ability to trust your gut and understand that you're feeling this way for a reason, you can really use it for good. And it can be a really powerful tool. But there's definitely a part of life during which I tried to squash it and ignore it. And with that came the ignoring the fact that I didn't feel good doing what I was doing, or that it wasn't aligned with my values, or not even my values, but how my sort of passion, where my passion lies, I guess. I just ignored it as I ignored everything else because it was all about squashing it. So that's been a really interesting shift over the last 6 months or so, that I'm starting to use it in a different way. And it's being recognized as a strength now, which trusting to let it out again after so many years of just pushing it further and further down was a huge chance that I took. And it's paying off now. And I'm sure some of that is just perspective as well, having enough perspective to route it the right way and to know when it's a founded emotion, or whether it's founded on truth, or whether it's founded on just an emotional reaction because I didn't like something, right? There's two. But it's become really useful of late, whereas I tried to ignore it for years.
I think that, again, you made a lot of really good points there. I need to go back and try to highlight some of them. But one of them is that there's really a dual perspective here, and most people aren't looking at both sides of it. But the normal perspective is that is to ask, what's wrong with me? Like, why is it that I'm having trouble when everyone else is having an easy time? Or why is it that I'm so emotional and everyone else seems so calm and so logical and so rational? What's wrong with me? That's usually the mantra, is just, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And that's one way to look at it. It's not an especially empowering or fun or enjoyable way to look at it. It makes you feel like garbage and makes you feel ashamed and makes you just constantly doubt yourself. So you could go that way, or you could go the other way, which is, okay, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. And maybe there's some sort of misalignment here between me and what I'm doing. Maybe I'm not too emotional, or too whatever, loud, opinionated, creative, whatever, or not solid enough or stable enough or logical enough or whatever it is. Maybe none of that is true. Maybe it's just, this isn't a good fit. Like, we're just not compatible. Me and this thing, we're not compatible. And maybe those things are superpowers instead of something wrong with me. And I just need an outlet to showcase my superpowers. And when I do that, all of a sudden people are going to see and appreciate me for who I am. And people can't do that if I'm in a setting which doesn't enable me to use those abilities.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you're not able to ask yourself why you're reacting in a certain way, or why it doesn't feel right, or why you're not as successful as you want to be, and look at it from an actual objective perspective as much as you possibly can as a human, to say, it's not this person's fault that this didn't work. It's just, I'm not a fit for this, or I don't have the right skill set, or they aren't able to hear me because they don't have the perspective. I think there's just something about being able to stand in the middle of the room, in the middle of the situation, and objectively try to understand what they're seeing versus what you're seeing and where the disconnect is, because generally things just happen. They don't happen to you. It's just that they happen, and then you have to adjust to what it means for you. And when you're reacting purely from a place of emotion, then everything feels like it happens to you. And if you're reacting from a place where you've shoved emotion down so far, you're pretending it doesn't exist at all, then you can't even begin to have the conversation around what actually happened and what does it mean to me and why do I care and what you can't even do those things. So
totally. I think most people who listen to this podcast know that I don't really identify as a people pleaser, but I do very much resonate with like being overly emotional for sure. Like I definitely have that going for me. And so, yeah, so what you just said resonates a lot with me on that level, that not everything is about you. Oh my God.
In fact, virtually nothing is about you.
Like I am a coach. I've been a coach for 8 years. I do every day. I make things about me just because I have an ego, and we all do. And that's what the ego does. Its only job is to make everything about you. And so maybe that person's feedback is not actually personal. Maybe it's just, that's the way they would have, worded that email or something. And it doesn't mean the way you worded that was wrong. It just means, I don't know, that's what they did. That's what I said. Why are we taking it and making it mean something it doesn't? So
right.
In a way, you're making a point that I often make with clients in general, which is, yes, everything, there are things about you that are superpowers, but then if we take those things too far, they can become kind of detrimental.
Overused skills.
Overused skills. Being an emotional person is great because it comes with a lot of empathy and a lot of intuition and all of that. But when you kind of take being an emotional creature too far, then it's like every little thing is bothering you, or every little thing is, about you, when it's really not. So good perspective on that.
People are just doing their best. I think that's the other thing, is most people don't get up in the morning and come to work and want to make your life terrible. Most people are just doing their best with the tools they have.
Yes.
And most of the time, they either spent no time on that email because they were in a certain place and you asked them a question and they responded and it came off however they were feeling that day. And then you took it and thought, well, what does this mean about the way they think about me, that they responded this way? It means nothing. It means that they were in a hurry or they responded from their phone at the airport. Like it's very different. But I think the nice thing that AID helps you recognize that emotions are not forever. They're temporary things, and they can guide you, but they're temporary. And if you can just sit in them long enough to experience them and come out the other side, then rationally at the situation and determine whether you caused it and you should change or whether it just wasn't a fit and therefore you should find something different, or whether it was founded on truth or whether perception. So
I'm curious, how much more, this is a theory, but how much more trigger happy potentially were you, or overly emotional, quote unquote, were you when you were in a job that wasn't aligned with you versus now? Because I think sometimes when you're in a situation that takes a lot of energy to just be there because you're having to work against how you're really wired, I think the depletion of that can make you a little bit more afraid and a little bit more just liable to kind of collapse or explode, or, just it's difficult. So I'm curious, like, is it easier now?
It is. I call it being thin. I get thin after a while.
I love that. Yeah. You're like
your buffer.
It's just frayed and worn down.
Right. So it's gotten thin. And when it gets thin, the emotion slips through quicker and faster and more aggressively. And so when I get thin, it did happen a lot more in my past career. And it happened because I felt like I was trying so hard, because I was trying so hard. Everything I did took an insane amount of effort because it was not my natural state. So I was trying so hard, working so hard, that when someone they didn't think it was the best choice, or they had feedback for what it was, or they didn't think it went that well, it zapped right to the center of my core because there was nothing protecting me. There was no buffer. And so, because my buffer was spent trying to, it's like when you're really cold and you get sick easier because your body is trying to keep you warm rather than ward off whatever it's trying to ward off.
Viruses or whatever.
Obviously, right. I have a biology degree. So
I was like, good analogy. I wouldn't have used that one.
Half my family might tell me later that I'm wrong on that analogy, but let's go with it.
That's fine.
Versus now, because what I'm doing is so much more aligned with how I process information, how I think, how I connect with people, my buffers are a lot thicker because it doesn't take so much energy. So I can do it faster, more efficiently. It's just, I think you said it, ease equals alignment. And that's sort of where I am. And so when someone's to give me feedback, now I feel like they're making something better, and I feel like everything I do, I get it to 80% and someone else is going to help me get it to 20. That's 20. And that's a really healthy way to interact in the world, because then it means nothing you've done is wrong. You just need someone, two heads are better than one, or three heads are better than two.
Oh, I feel like the tables have been turned and you're coaching me right now. Because I still struggle with this a lot. Like, if there's anything, Kristen and I kind of feel like there's 3 different types of people pleasers. There's sort of the classic people pleaser, which I think you can identify with. I think there's probably some of each of them in every person. But, the classic people pleaser, which is, I just want you to like me and I want to be accepted and I'm going to do what it takes. I'm a nice person. I want to be seen as a nice person. And then there's kind of the avoidant people pleaser, which is, I'm not going to go out of my way to please you, but I'm definitely going to go out of my way to avoid conflict with you. Right. And so in doing that, you're just never rocking the boat, and you might not be running at people, but you're certainly like on a covert level trying to, you are pleasing because you're not actually advocating for what you want. You're not speaking up. And then there's perfectionist, which is, I'm going to manage your impression of me through how good my work is and through how productive I am. I think you can identify with that one too. Mm-hmm. That, if anything, I identify a lot with just having had perfectionist tendencies. And so I love this, getting it 80% of the way there and then letting other people add their 20, because I'm still have to struggle with the mindset of, just because someone is giving you feedback, it doesn't mean they don't like what you did.
No, not at all.
Or that if they have a different approach, that means they don't appreciate yours. I'm kind of the mindset that I got it 100% of the way there, and who are you to question me?
Isn't that exhausting though?
Yes. Oh my God, it's complete. I mean, this is partially why I have, in my own business and I work for myself, is because I just can't. I think that this is part of being a fire starter, or at least having a lot of fire starter energy, is that autonomous independent streak is really big. And it pains you for people to tell you what to do. But if those people have good intentions and they actually are smart people with interesting things to say, it's not necessarily a bad thing to let them. And I struggle with that. So I think that this is just really helpful for me to hear too.
Because what's funny about it to me is that your anxiety spikes when you feel out of control. But if I do it 100%, if I get something what I consider 100%, and then I send it out to the 1,300 people who I build programs for. So I build programs for 1,300 people. There are going to be a ridiculous number of people who don't agree to what I wrote, because I wrote it with my one brain. So I created it with my one perspective, with my one brain, with my 30 plus years of experience of life. That's it. If I get it to 80%, and then I have people from my team who sit around the world look at it, who have different perspectives, and they build it out the rest of the way, and then I send it out to 1,300 people, it's a much different response, because I didn't do it on my own. It has multiple perspectives. And what's funny is that brings my anxiety down. So it's the opposite. So yours spikes when you feel like someone else is involved and you have to meet their expectations. Mine drops when I feel like others have helped carry the burden and have helped me sort of smooth the edges of what it is that I've created and made it as palatable as possible.
Well, guys, you heard it here first. If Rachael doesn't eventually end up becoming a coach, I'm going to be surprised, because that was an excellent demonstration of a core coaching skill, which is the ability to reframe something and to change your perspective on how you see it and make it healthier. And so you're so right that there's a completely different way to see the idea of feedback and collaboration, which I don't think is off topic at all for us. I think that this has so much to do with people pleasing, is that people pleasers are often very, very concerned about feedback, and they're looking for like, if they don't do something perfectly from the beginning, they feel like, oh no, they don't like me, or something's wrong with me, or they don't like my work. And what does that mean? Are they going to fire me? I mean, our inner critic goes a mile a minute in a negative direction. And so this I think is really helpful to kind of reframe that it's okay for you to do 80%. And to let other people contribute, or to let other people have potentially contrary feedback, because ultimately you and your one brain might not actually have the one definitive right answer.
Right. Or you might legitimately be missing a point of view that you have no idea exists.
Yeah.
Because you're one person. So you may literally have no concept that you've missed something. And generally, the other thing is too, feedback is a gift, but it can also be weaponized. So you can take everyone's feedback and hear it, but you don't have to act on it, and you don't have to bring it into yourself. And so some people are going to give you feedback that is mean, and they're going to do it because they're intimidated by you, or you've done something they weren't able to do, or they're afraid of what you're doing because you're going to push them out of their comfort zone and they don't want to go out of their comfort zone. And all that is them showing their hand. It's a poker game. They just showed you what their fear is, and they showed you what they're concerned about. Versus the people that are going to help you, and they're going to give you feedback because they want you to be successful and they want to help you on your journey. And those people are the ones you want to partner with. And those people are the ones that can be welcome in your inner circle. And you have to trust your gut to be able to tell the difference.
That's a really good point. Yes. Some people are giving you feedback because they genuinely care, and because they genuinely just want to find a solution with you, and they want to champion you, not just because they think they're right and you're wrong. I have to remember that. Yeah. But then sometimes, right, everyone's intention matters. And I think it's really important for everybody to learn how to, like you said, in a healthy way, examine other people's intentions, because that's not easy at first. Discernment can be hard, especially for people pleasers.
And you are completely entitled to say, that's really interesting. Why might you think that? Can you give me an example? Because that'll tell you pretty quickly where they're coming from. Because their example will actually be either very specific with a very empathetic point of view about why it may not have worked so well, or what the feedback was that they heard on your behalf that they're trying to help you with. Or it will be a general, well, I felt this way when you did that. And that's not...
Which is very personal to them, right?
And it's very personal to them.
It's not about you, right? It's not about them trying to help you, right? Yeah,
And then in that conversation, you come out the winner because you just sounded controlled, mature, on top of things, and they sounded like they were more concerned about their own perception than anything else. And so you start to build this natural barrier between people that don't have your best interest at heart, because as you start asking probing questions, if you can hold your emotion at bay long enough to ask the probing question and understand where it comes from, you just get a completely different perspective.
So I want to circle back to the part where you were scaring people. And to me, you can kind of put it in your own words, but I saw it as the transition from you going to workhorse to sort of coming out of the closet, so to speak, as a show horse. And allowing that to happen, and allowing people to see that you are creative and you're sparkly, and what you'd been doing for, a decade was not actually the real core of who you were. And to sort of show people, I'm actually very different than you. And I know I was good at what I did before, but I have all these skills and all this stuff you've never seen from me, and I'm going to let it out. And oh God, what's going to happen next? So
my favorite example of this is, and you mentioned this when we very first met and had only been talking by email on our first call, is that on the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, I am a P, which is somebody who likes to have freedom. We don't like to plan a lot. We end up sort of just like, I'll finish the deck or the PowerPoint presentation 3 minutes before the meeting and be comfortable with that. Versus the opposite, which is you've got to have everything scheduled out, all T's crossed, all I's dotted, very specific. And if you read my emails, I read the opposite of what I am. And if you watch me and work, but it's because I've overcompensated for what I considered for a long time to be a weakness. And so I overcompensated to a point where I built in structure that I didn't enjoy, but it made me successful, as I felt it was making me successful. And now my role is to lead transformation and build capability. And that means that I have to take chances and try different things and try different techniques and I need to lead people on that journey. And so that's been really interesting because you can't do it wrong if no one ever has done it before. So it's not wrong. It's just different and new. And I think, when you try something new, it's really easy to think, well, am I doing this wrong? Would someone else have done it differently? It doesn't really matter. What matters is you're trying something and you'll learn from that and you'll decide what would have worked better or what you could have done differently. And you'll just build on. And it's about a bit of a modular approach, right? Progress over perfection. And I wouldn't do that for a really long time because I was afraid. I felt that my ideas, the way that I sort of saw things, wasn't valued because it wasn't status quo. We know it works. We do what works consistently. But now I'm in this space where I'm expected to do different things. I'm expected to come with new ideas. I'm expected to try new things. And I've really shifted to this mindset of it's not wrong if no one has ever tried it before. So I'm just going to try something. If it doesn't work, I'll shift and I'll pivot and I'll go differently. But it's all well thought out. It's all well reasoned. So I'm doing the due diligence and then I'm taking a chance or a risk or just doing something different. And it's really being accepted well because we're trying to change things. And that's how you spark change and become a change agent. So I'm letting my P fly.
Your P flag?
Yes, my P flag fly in this realm. And it's really helping me because the fluidity of that lets me adjust in the moment. And so I'm actually having more fun. It's being really well received. I told you the other day, I was told I had a MacGyver spirit, which is a huge compliment. It felt so good. It felt like I was being seen for the first time in many, many years in a professional environment. And then I was being valued for what I brought to the table, which was different than what a lot of other people brought to the table.
I think that, again, you're making a very good and like a point that I'm sure we've made so many times, but it's one of those that people can never hear enough. It might take 1,000 times before it really sinks in, which is you cannot be seen for who you are unless you are willing to risk rejection. There is just literally no other way to go about it. And I love that you're proving that, yeah, I've taken some pretty big risks and I've put myself out there, and lo and behold, people are giving me good feedback and people are receiving me well. And like that validation feels really good. It feels so much better to be seen for who you are than to be accepted for all of that work you were doing before to try really, really hard to be someone you're not. Like that didn't really feel that good, did it?
And also I was successful, but I was also always being told of what I could do better or differently.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
Of course, because it's not actually me. I'm pushing against a wall to try to deliver something. Whereas now I'm just running. And if you want to tell me other things I could do better, it's a very different conversation. It's about how do you deliver on someone else's expectations of who they think you are versus how do you add on additional capability or skills or glitter when you're being who you really are, right? It's very different. The feedback is different. The ability to accept it is different. It pivots. It's like the whole world pivots. So
I think that you actually just made a really good point about how people can learn to discern what quality feedback they're getting. That is such a good point that it's, okay, is this person trying to get me to align with their expectations for who they think I am? Or are they actually advocating for who I really am? And do they see me as who I really am? Because it's pretty obvious.
The next question is, am I letting them see me for who I really am?
Yeah, right.
Or are they giving me feedback because there's sort of multiple layers of this. Are they trying to help me? Or is this really central to them?
Yeah.
And then are they trying to help me go the direction I want to go because it's who I am, or the direction they think I want to go because it's who they think I am? And have I given them the clarity on who I am?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So one last kind of, I want to go on and on, but one last big question I have for you is, can you, I think they would really appreciate it, the audience that is, if you gave a few specific sort of examples of what you did that you thought was going to scare people.
I have come out with a different, so we sort of have these models by which we train things and very specific ways that we teach, very specific ways that we facilitate. And I sort of came out and said, actually, I think there's an entirely new way to do this. And I've built it myself in alignment with 3 other people who I think you value. And we're actually going to do it this way. And what's crazy about it is it feels so simple when I say this, like I give this example and it seems like, well, it's not a big deal. But when it's completely different than the organization has been doing it for years upon years, when you're pivoting who's responsible and who's accountable and what's available, and you're literally just so I call it taking a chance, because in the past we would have had to build something out entirely, gotten it all the way finished, and then we'd turn around and say, here's your finished product, go and have fun. And of course, 25% of people would back and say, well, I don't understand, or I this isn't quite right, or whatever perspective on it. And now we're taking this process, we're doing a progress over perfection. So we're calling it a sprint. We're doing something, I'm going to deliver it to this point. And yes, it's not perfect, but look how much better it is than before. So we built a centralized platform for knowledge management, and we launched it and we said, here it is. We think it's about 80% there. We're going to have all of you help us build the last 20%. So what else do you want to see? What other information do you have that we don't have? What were you surprised by? What do you love? And that is completely anti most corporations over the last 10 years or so, because it's just a pivot to, we're going to let the organization help us get at the last 20%, which is kind of unheard of. Like, you just need to deliver it as a team. And now we're sort of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, and it's very different. Those are probably my 2 best examples, even though they're not really tangible. I don't know how tangible they are.
Well, I think people can relate to that. I mean, a lot of people probably want to be able to push for sort of an organization-wide change to the way something is done. And that's huge. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of personalities that go into that, a lot of competing viewpoints that go into that. And there can be a lot of sort of, confrontation that can go into that. And so I think people can definitely resonate with the idea that that's a scary thing for you to have done. And the fact that you're so much more relaxed than when I met you.
I think your exact words to me were, if you let go of the vice grip you have on the steering wheel, the car is not going to veer off the road. I think that's what you told me in the beginning. And that image is constantly in my head. If I don't have to be white knuckle grip on the steering wheel, I'm not going to crash and burn if I loosen up a little bit.
The car might, it might veer just a little bit left and right, but like, you're not going to crash. No, it's like, you were white knuckling it, and you're so much more content and relaxed and easy. And I think you let things roll off your back now in a way that you just were not capable of before. And so you're just kind of a walking advertisement for how much better life is when you're willing to like be a lot, just go with what feels good to you, and like be kind of out in the open about who I am and how I'm wired. And be vulnerable enough to let people see that and to do things the way that feel good to you, and then risk rejection. And not everyone, you're never going to get 100% acceptance, but the vast majority of people who do see you and accept you for who you are very much will make up for the small amount of people who might just not get it.
And if they don't get it, it's likely not about you, right?
100%. Sure. Yeah. It's about, right. Their inability to get you is not a personal thing. They have some baggage around likely someone who you remind them of that has nothing to do with you, likely from their way, way back past.
Yes, exactly. And it's very freeing to be able to say, this is who I am. This is what triggers me. This is what drives me. In the end, most of us just want to be loved and accepted. So if that's where you're coming from and where people are coming from, you can pretty easily figure out what their specific rationale is for a specific action. But you've got to be able to depersonalize it and realize that it's not about you.
I mean, that's a great note to end on. Guys, it's not about you. I know that you think it is. And I know that as people pleasers, this is one of the most ironic things I find about people pleasers in general, is that they see themselves as very selfless people. and very caring. And they are. But in being so worried about what other people think, you are actually very, by definition, self-centered. You are centering yourself in relation to everyone else. And that's actually just not how the world operates. You are not the center, in an egotistical way or in a selfless way. You actually aren't the center of everything, which is a relief to know that.
It is. Everyone else's happiness does not hinge on you.
No, it turns out that
Thank
they'll
goodness.
be one way or the other, they'll find a way to get what they want to get done or be happy, like without you needing to be the linchpin. So thank you for, sharing your wisdom with us. I feel like you coached me through some things that have been annoying me lately. And I'm like, oh, okay, see, this is what like good, intuitive, empathetic feedback can feel like. I feel so much better now after this conversation.
Well, I'm glad I could help you as much as you've helped me.
It's a totally fair exchange. I love it. So thank you. And I would really love to hear what people think about this. I feel like you shared so many little things that I've already forgotten about, probably, that I just from earlier in this conversation. I'm going to be excited to go back and listen to this, because I think you said a lot, and that people might need to listen to this more than once to just get everything out of it that it's possible to get out of it. So if this is resonating with you, I'm sure Rachael and I would love to hear your feedback. So come leave a comment and notes in the show notes. There'll be a link to this episode. So we'd love to hear what you guys think and what parts of this you resonate with and what's inspiring you.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later, Rachael.
Bye.
Bye.
If Rachael inspired you to want to get over your own people-pleasing tendencies, if she showed you the light of what's possible on the other side, then I hope you will join our VIP list for our Getting Over People-Pleasing course, which will be opening for enrollment next Friday. Mm-hmm. But if you're on the VIP list, you're the first to know. You might even get some extra special perks. So make sure that you join that, and we'll make sure you can get in next week.
I can't remember which episode we mentioned this on. I think it was the Tuesday one, but we've recorded 3 episodes today. And so I don't know what we did or what we didn't when we did it. But we're also going to bring back a little bit of what we did, a little flavor of what we did during the we're still in the pandemic, but when we were doing the pandemic special, I again apologize for using that phrase. We offered single sessions. So we're going to be doing that in combination with Getting Over People Pleasing. So if you want to just do the course, great. If you want to add a single session, we're going to allow that. And it'll be like a discounted bundle.
Yep.
So that will be an option.
Yeah, some of you might want a little bit of personalized support as you're going through the course. And that's what that's for, is you can get a lot out of just taking the course on its own and having the accountability of the group. But there's something that takes it even deeper when someone is one-on-one laser focusing in with you on helping you get over that, or anything else that you want to talk about truly in the session.
Whatever. I'll coach you around anything.
Sure. But that's going to be an option as well.
Okay, cool. So that will be going live on the 21st, and you'll have a week to sign up if you want to. And then we'll get started on Monday, the 31st. So link in episode notes if you want to read more about that. Join the VIP list. And we will see you on... Will we see you on Tuesday? I don't think we will. But
I think it's going to be Friday.
I mean, it is my birthday that day. So I'm like, should we put something out? Because it's like a day to celebrate me. Or should we not, so that I don't have to do any work? So you'll know what I chose depending on what does or doesn't happen on Tuesday. Okay?
Right, we'll see.
Bye.